OMAV yazılımı. OMAV yazılımı, parça çizimleri oluşturmak ve parçayı kesmek için kullanılır. OMAV yazılımı, jet işleme merkezinin çalışmasını tamamen kontrol eder. OMAV Layout programı. Layout adlı OMAV CAD modülü, kesim için parçalar oluşturur. Bu çizim yazılımı, çok çeşitli çizim ve düzenleme araçları içerir. Diğer CAD programlarından DXF dosyaları layout'a alınabilir. İçinde ek olarak, DXF dosyaları layout'tan diğer CAD programlarına aktarılabilir. Düzenin nihai sonucu, aynı zamanda makine kesme talimatlarını da içeren bir OMAV yönlendirilmiş veri dosyasının oluşturulması olacaktır.
Welcome to the OMAX Layout software. In this video, we're going to show the basic movements within OMAX software as well as how to draw basic shapes. So the first thing is manipulating the screen. In order to move around, the fastest way is to zoom in and out. So by rolling the middle mouse button, we can zoom in and out of the page. The grid represents 1-inch squares in the OMAX software. And if I ever lose where I'm at completely, clicking the extents button brings it all back. Notice the zoom occurs about where my mouse is located, so I can zoom in and out fairly quickly around the screen, and then extents brings me back to the total size of my grid. The first shape I want to demonstrate is drawing a line. So one way to draw a line is to click on the line command and just start drawing points. So from to, and I can drop that line wherever it is. The problem with having a line like this is that I don't know how long it is, and I don't know where it starts and where it finishes. So rather than doing that, another way is to choose the line command and to be more controlled. I'm going to use the XY position here, and I'm entering in coordinates. So maybe I want to start at 2, tab 3. Now notice where my line is located. Again, I can zoom in and out. I'm at the 2 inches by 3 inches location, and I can just drop it at any spot, or we can do, maybe I want this to be a 5-inch line at a 30-degree angle, and it calculates for me where that ought to be. Another useful way to create lines is to click the line command, zoom in to where I'm interested of connecting two lines, and as long as I'm fairly close to the points, when I click on the line it'll automatically snap to them. There's several different ways to make the line. Another useful line command is start a new line, and we're going to start first at the 0, 0 point. That put the first point located at the origin. And the second point maybe I want to connect to the end, and so there's our final line. Other shapes we can create with the software, I can draw boxes. Boxes work the same way. We'll start the command. Let's enter in a location. Let this one start at 2, 2. And then I'm going to indicate its length and its width. Again, I can drop it, but a better idea would be to type in, maybe I want this to be 3 wide and 4 tall, and it'll create a box of that shape. If I want to move things around, I need to select what I'm interested in moving. So the drop down for the select lets me now select, and they're turning yellow. And so I can do a move, for instance, so we'll click the move command, and again I have the same dialog popping up. I'm just going to pick a random spot, and then it's going to tell me I can move it randomly, or I can move it in a more controlled manner. So let's move it over 2 inches in the X direction, and then I'm going to right click on deselect and deselect all, so we're back to the beginning. If I need to delete things, several different ways I can do it. One way is just to click the erase command, and now anything that I click while I'm in that erase command will delete. Another way to do it is to select different portions. So for instance, if I right click on the select, let's do select around a window, and let's draw a window here around everything. Now right click on erase, and we're going to erase the things that have been selected right here. That erases everything. So we're back to the beginning now. Another thing that might be interesting is to put circles exactly in the middle of the box. So let's start with the box command, and we'll start with the XY position. I'm going to start from 1, 1, and let's go to 6, 2. Click OK. There's my box. If I'm interested in putting a circle right in the middle, this could be difficult. So the way to do that is to grab the line command and connect from point to point. Then grab the circle command, and we're going to choose the middle of this line. So I clicked the middle button, and now I'm moving to the line. When I click the line, it automatically snaps the circle to the middle. Now I can draw it by diameter, so let's let it have a 1-inch diameter. There it is. Now that I'm finished with that, let's use the select command, and here, and erase. Selected. After I have an interesting part, it might be useful for me to copy this part and save time. So to do that, I'm going to use right-click on selected, and this time I'm going to use the connected button. Click this line, and anything that's touching that line will be selected, so do it twice. That's everything. And now instead of move, let's click on the copy command. And I think this time I'll start at the origin. This is really just beginning where my dragging points for where I want to copy. So I want to rise, see this is 2 inches, so I better rise 3 inches to get it up out of the way. Click it OK. And let's do 3 copies. So click OK. And zooming extents, we now have several different things. Notice the last one is still highlighted, so we'll right click on deselect, and it works just like the select. We'll just deselect all. So there's how to create basic shapes within the layout framework. When I'm finished, I'll click File and Save As, and I'll save this as Layout 1. And it's saving as a DXF file. We'll click Save, and we're finished with this tutorial.
MAKİNE programı. MAKİNE yazılımı, layout çizimini kesme işlemi için hazırlar. Optimum sonuçlar için aşındırıcı jetin hızını hesaplar ve tüm işleme operasyonlarını kontrol eder. Parçayı işlemek için ne kadar zaman ve aşındırıcı malzeme gerektiğini hesaplayabilir ve jet işleme merkezine bağlı değilken bile aşındırıcı jetin tam yolunu gözden geçirmenizi sağlar. Otomatik makine sıfır noktasına göndermek. Bir kesme kafasını giriş köşesinden her eksen için yaklaşık 10 inç hareket ettirin. Makine'de Homes, Advanced, Auto Homes'ini tıklayın. Uygunsa, uyarı mesajı göründüğünde Tamam'ı tıklayın. 4 Absolute Home'u yeniden sıfırlamanız istendiğinde Evet'i seçin. Makineniz artık doğru şekilde hizalanmış ve kullanıma hazır olmalıdır. Çiziminizi yapılandırma. Bir parça dosyanızı OMAV çizim aracı olan layout'a aktarın. İki gereksiz noktaları kaldırarak, boşlukları kapatarak ve yinelenen objeleri kaldırarak çizim dosyasını temizlemek için temizle komutunu kullanın. 3 Her parça öğesi için gereken kesim kalitesini tanımlayın. Kalite 1, en düşük kalitede ve en hızlı kesimdir. Kalite 5, en yüksek kalitede ve en yavaş kesimdir. Dört Nozül girişlerini ve çıkışlarını kesme yoluna ekleyin. Girişler genellikle daha uzun sürer, çıkışlar daha kısa çizilir. Giriş çıkışlarınızı yerleştirdiğiniz öğe tarafı, püskürtme ucunun öğenin sol tarafının mı yoksa sağ tarafını mı keseceğini belirler. Meme, girişte en az keskin dönüş yönünde hareket eder. Giriş ve çıkış yapılandırmalarınızı her zaman layout'ta doğrulayın. Kare köşelerde 90 derece giriş ve çıkış kullanın. Tanık izlerini veya kusurları en aza indirmek için giriş, çıkışta dar bir açı kullanın. .5txv dosyanızın tamamlanmış sürümünü kaydedin. Altı makine yolunu belirtmek için düzen yolu özel aracını kullanın. Yolu manuel veya otomatik olarak yapılandırın. Sonucu doğrulamak için katı olarak işleyin. Çarpışma tespitini çalıştırın ve bulunanları düzeltin. 7 son yol çiziminizi kaydedin. Düzen, onu otomatik olarak bir OMAV dosyası olarak kaydeder.
Hello everyone. This is a quick demonstration of the capabilities of the clean utility that is in IntelliMax layout. The reason for wanting to clean a drawing is that not all CAD systems produce a drawing where everything is optimized. Therefore, it is a good idea to run the clean utility so that the drawing will no longer have problems such as disconnected entities, duplicate entities, or an excessive number of entities. In the drawing that I have on the screen, we can immediately see that there are a lot of endpoints that comprise the features of the drawing. Many of these are unnecessary. And if we take a closer look at the drawing, we can see that there are gaps in the geometry. These gaps can foil the automatic toolpath routine in creating a toolpath from this drawing. In addition, there are entities in the drawing that are duplicated. If I use the selection tool in various areas of the drawing, and then go ahead and use the move tool to move what I have selected out of the way, we can see that there are more entities that lay underneath what I have just moved. This isn't good because it can foil the automatic pathing routines that are in layout. I'm going to go ahead and undo what I have just moved and point out one more thing in the drawing. We have disconnected entities throughout the drawing, both inside the toolpath as well as out on the perimeter, and then partially connected entities on the toolpath as well. We don't desire any of these disconnected entities to be part of the final toolpath, so we need to clean those up as well. This is where the IntelliMax Clean utility comes in. Simply click on the Clean button and then select the options which you want to use in cleaning the toolpath, and then click the Start. You might get a warning that your file is going to be backed up automatically to an extra DXF file. Just simply continue anyway, and note that we achieved an immediate result. Here we can see that we have reduced the drawing size by 871 elements, and then eliminated a good number of overlapping elements, duplicate entities, removal of gaps, and then finally 15 entities that were part of unclosed paths. Overall, I now have 304 entities in the drawing, and being that I had 871 that were removed, that meant that this drawing once had over 1100 elements. If I zoom in on the gap that I had before, we can see that the gap is now gone. And if I go ahead and move the entities out of the way that I had duplicates of, we can see that those duplicates are no longer there. I'm going to go ahead and undo that change. And then I'm going to go ahead and assign all the entities a quality of cut, and then proceed to making a toolpath automatically, and you can see that the leads and traverse is laid in place just nicely without any problems.
Parçanın kesilmesi.
Program, and what I did was file, open, change path setup, and then I went to E drive, which is my flash drive again, and then I picked the piece I want to cut, picked the steel I wanted to cut. This is mild steel, and then I changed my thickness and I changed it to 180 thousandths. I didn't adjust the scale or anything because I knew when I drew it how big I drew it, but if you ever need to adjust it later, say it doesn't fit on the piece of steel that you put on the table, then that's the quick way to adjust it right here is on your scale. So I'm going to press OK. And then what happens, if Don zooms in, it gives me an estimated time to make the part. It's 19 minutes. Estimated cost is $15. That's set in another setting to where you tell the machine how much you're charging to run parts on this machine. More importantly is the abrasive, is how many pounds of abrasive you need. So you know if you have, I've opened up my part, and now I need to move my head to where I want it to be because I want to start it right down here. So I need to move my head to where I want it to start because that's going to be my start point is where I move it to. So I'm going to jog left, jog down, and I need to go more. So I'm going to hold left button to go fast. Now my hand won't actually come. It won't go all the way up against the edge, so I need to move my part a little bit, or move my material rather. Try to get it centered because I know my head won't come. It won't come all the way over to the edge. It'll come within a few inches. Making sure it doesn't move. So I want to jog this head down to here. So let me pull this foam off so you can actually see what we're looking at. All this foam is to keep the splash whenever it pierces, keep it from splashing everywhere. That's all that's used for. So I'm going to jog it down. And jog it left. Jog it down some more. Left, you can kind of eyeball it. If it's really close, you can really take your time. You can also move it, and you can move it right here. Whoops. Sorry about that. You can move it. You can jog it, which right now the jog, the right click. You can see how much it moves. So I'm at -1 inch, 654 thousandths. If I do a right click, -1 inch, 674 thousandths. So in the settings, each right click has been moved to 20 thousandths. Or that might not be true. So now I kind of have it where I want it to be in the X and Y axis. But I still need to set the height of my cutting head right here. So this has to be a certain height from my material. And we use this tool. This is a tool that always hangs right here. It's from Omax, and it gives you about 60 thousandths distance if you screw it down and get it close to your part. It's not super critical. I usually go down to it until I can't move it. And then I come up a little bit. I come up to where I can move it, pull it out, and then just maybe an eighth of a turn farther higher up. And then you're going to turn this handle to lock it. Lock it in position, and this is your Z-axis. Moving your eye. And if I want to, say I want to check and make sure the whole part stays on the piece of material. So I'm going to click on Begin Machining, just a left click, and then it's going to give me this Omax path control right here. Now if I press start, it's going to try and start cutting. So I want to right click on start, and then it gives you all these options. I'm going to dry run it full rapid traverse so that it just moves around really quick and I can see where it's going to go. And let me just right click, dry run. So where it just was, it's saying, I told it that that's home. So you can see it moving around where it's going to put these pieces. Now you can't really tell between rapids and cutting moves because they're all at full speed at rapid movement. Okay, and it just stopped on me because it actually went too far, and it's giving me an error, babysit. Okay, so anytime that this happens, there's a switch on the control board called reset override. Now you want to be very careful whenever you're turning this. It'll let you keep going that direction. So whenever you're turning this, let me close this real quick. Turn this, and I'm going to right click on jog left. I'm just really slowly moving it. So I'm holding the reset override and I'm right clicking away from the edge of the table. So I got too close to the edge. Sometimes it takes turning it left and right and then holding it the other direction. But I got away from the edge. So I know I'm getting too close to the edge in that far corner. So I'm going to need to move my whole piece over just a little bit farther to the left. Let me jog back to where home is, or rather where I'm setting my home, because I moved my piece. I need to reset where my home's going to be. Okay, so I have it down here in the corner, which is kind of where I put it on my cart. And whenever I press begin machining, it's going to say, okay, where it is right now is home. So press begin machining, right click on start, and dry run it at full speed rapid convert. So now we can watch it go again and make sure that it's not going to hit anything. And as it's moving, you can actually see on the screen, it shows you where it is. These crosshairs, where the crosshairs are moving is where it is right now. And then it stopped. It stopped on my last lead out. So this is the lead in, this is my last lead out. So that's where it stops. And if you want to, it's okay right now. So say I want to go back, say that worked perfectly. I want to go back to that same exact home. I'll press close on this. That was my cutting screen. And then up here on the right, there's a go home. There's two different go homes. I'm going to pick the second one. And then it's going to come up, go to path start home. I'm going to press OK. That's exactly where I want it to go, is path start home. So it's going to go right back to that home that I just set whenever I did that quick run on that cut. So now we're ready to actually put the weights back on where it's not going to get hit by the head, and then we can raise our water level up. Water level is controlled by this knob right here on the control board. So this is, I mean, up and down. All the water does is it keeps it quiet, and you usually want to bring it up a little bit farther than your head so that way it's quiet. And another thing I didn't show was I took this off so you could actually see the head, because normally I'd have this on and right now I can't get it on because I have nowhere to put it. I'd have to undo this, bring it back up, I'd have to put this on. So let me just do that real quick. Let me just bring this up. It's foam, so you can obviously squeeze it to get it on. I stick it up like that so I can still see where my tip is, or rather I can feel where it is. And so now I've lost my Z-axis. I need to reset that. Now the nice thing is you can jog it to the right, you can jog it up, and I can jog it to where it's actually back on the piece, because it's kind of hard to set down in the corner. So I can jog it up here where I have a nice flat spot to use my tool. I'll bring it back down. I'll set it. I can pull my tool out, and I gave it a little bit extra space. And then all I can do, I can just set this back down, because this is just for splash control. And right now, I can bring up the water level. And remember how I jogged it up and to the right? I can go right back to home with this second home button. So there's two of them. The first one is user home. Don't use that one. It actually pops up and says go to user home. Just press cancel. Click on the second one and path start home. That takes you right back to the corner where you wanted it to start. We might have to add some water to this tank. There might be some in there. And as you can see right there, whenever it bubbles like that, it's at the top of its stroke. So that's not going to be enough water to cover my peas, and to cut kind of underwater. So the water hose is over here. You can add some water. You can just turn it on. And we use this big chunk of metal just to hold it there. And so while I'm waiting for that, I'll actually turn the charge pump on, because I'm ready to cut right now. You don't have to have the piece underwater, but it just makes it a lot quieter and less splash. So over here on the control board, there it is, the main power, which we turn the machine on with. There's an emergency stop switch, and then there's this switch, which says charge pump. Right now it's off. I'm gonna turn it on, and you'll hear it start. And then the other clue that your charge pump is running, you're going to see this tube on the right, it's going to be pumping out water. And we're actually ready to cut right now. So I know I'm in my home position, bringing the water up a little bit higher. And then we're going to go to begin machining. Left click. And so it's actually ready right now. If I just press start, it'll go. Now let's say I forgot to turn my charge pump on. It's actually gonna just go, and it's actually not gonna do anything. And what you would have to do, you'd have to stop it, go back home, and then you'd have to, say it's already off, you'd have to press the reset button right here on the control board. You'd have to reset it, and then turn your pump on, and then try to cut. So sometimes you just forget to turn the charge pump on. So I'm going to go ahead and press start. You hear the pump kick on, and that was the pierce. That's That's how long it took it to pierce to that material. And now it's cutting. I'm zoomed in on the screen right now, but if I zoom out, it's showing me exactly where it's cutting right now. It gives me a percentage of completion up here. It gives me a remaining time in minutes, seconds, and hours. So here's my whole piece. Here's where it's cutting. And then you just have to let it cut. I can lower the water down. But as you can hear, it gets a lot louder. So really just the water is just keeping it quiet.
Bu ekipmanı çalıştırmadan önce, sizin ve diğer operatörlerin gerekli koruma cihazlarına erişebildiğinden emin olun. KİOMAV ekipmanınız için ana güç kesiciyi açın. 3 takılıysa, dökme hunisi ve ortak su hava deposu üzerindeki boşaltma valflerini kapatın. 4 hava besleme valfini açın. 5 su besleme vanasını açın. Altı su seviyesinin yarısı ile 4'te 3'ü arasında dolu olduğunu doğrulamak için pompanın içindeki beyaz su deposunu kontrol edin. 7 ohm'ar yüksek basınç pompasını aşağıdaki gibi çalıştırın. A pompa kontrol paneli anahtarını açık konuma getirin. Pompanın LCD ekranında geçerli RPM ve KSE okumalarını kontrol ederek pompanın çalışmasını doğrulayın. B şarj pompası kontrol paneli anahtarını açık konuma getirin. Beyaz su deposundaki 3 hortumun soğutma akışını her birinden benzer bir akış için inceleyin. Her birini yatay olarak tutarken, su düşmeden önce 2-4 inç dışarı akmalıdır. C şarj pompasını 15 dakika çalıştırdıktan sonra beyaz su deposunun su sıcaklığını ölçün. Her zaman 21,1 derece altında tutulmalıdır. Ne kadar soğuk o kadar iyidir. 8 PC kontrolörünün gücünü açık duruma getirerek Wetmachining Center'i çalıştırın. Windows işletim sisteminin sorunsuz bir şekilde ön yüklendiğini doğrulayın. Dokuz uygulanabilir olduğunda, bağlı OMAV aksesuarlarını açın. 10 kullanılan nozulun kesilen parça için gereken boyuta uygun olduğunu doğrulayın. Gerektiğinde doğru boyuta değiştirin. 11 nozul karıştırma tüpü ölçüsünü kullanarak karıştırma tüpünüzün düzgün şekilde takıldığından emin olun. Göstergenin hem karıştırma borusu ucuna hem de nozul koruma omzuna temas ettiğini doğrulayın. Her iki konumda da boşluk olmadığını doğrulayın. 12 istenen aşındırıcı boyutunu nozül haznenize dökün. Eklenen miktarın parçayı kesmeyi bitirmek için yeterli olduğundan emin olun. 13 tankın su seviyesini kontrol edin. Kesilen malzemenin tank suyuyla kaplanabileceğinden ve açılabileceğinden emin olun. tank suyunu gerektiği gibi ekleyin veya boşaltın. 14 Windows'ta, kesme yazılımını başlatmak için OMAV simgesine tıklayın. Makinenin sıfır konumunun ayarlandığından emin olmak için makineyi otomatik ana konuma getirin. 16 esnek limitlerin etkinleştirildiğini doğrulayın. 17 memeyi iki masa çıtası arasına su yüzeyinin 0,254 ila 3,81 santim yukarısına konumlandırın. 18 düşük basınçta meme çalışmasını test edin. A. Test pompası ve meme seçeneklerini görüntülemek için test düğmesine tıklayın. B. Düşük seçin, ardından testi başlatmak için suya tıklayın. CNC akışı başladığında, aşındırıcı besleme borusunu bimba valfindeki aşındırıcı besleme bloğundan çıkarın ve boru açıklığına parmağınızı tutarak besleme borusundan hava akışını engelleyin. Ardından, jet akışının kalitesini aşağıda gösterildiği gibi inceleyin. D. Hasarlı bir deliğin ve aşınmış karıştırma tüpünün memenin jet akımının kalitesi üzerindeki etkisini karşılaştırmak için şekline bakın. Bir jet akımının şeklinin kesme performansının kalitesini nasıl gösterdiğini görmek için şekille bakın. Bu jet akışı testi sırasında, istenen düşük basıncı elde etmek için pompa RPM'sini ayarlayın, ardından düşük basınç testi için pompa LCD ekranından pompa RPM ve KSE değerlerini yazın. Alçak basınç pompası testini sonlandırmak için durdura tıklayın. 19 yüksek basınçta meme çalışmasını test edin. Gerekirse, meme testi seçeneklerini tekrar görüntülemek için test düğmesine tıklayın. B. Yüksek'i seçin, ardından testi başlatmak için suya tıklayın. Jet akışı başladığında, jet akışının kalitesini incelemek ve şekilde gösterildiği gibi düz ve dar olduğunu doğrulamak için aşındırıcı besleme borusunu bloke olana kadar sıkıştırın. Bu jet akışı testi sırasında, istenen yüksek basınca ulaşmak için pompa RPM'sini ayarlayın, ardından yüksek basınç testi için pompa LCD ekranından pompa RPM ve KSE değerlerini yazın. Bu test sırasında tam akışta şarj basıncını da kontrol edin. Basınç göstergesi okuması arasındaki fark 20 libreyi geçmemelidir. Bundan fazlası varsa, büyük olasılıkla su filtrelerinin değiştirilmesi gerekir. Yüksek basınç pompası testini sonlandırmak için durdura tıklayın. Meme çalışmasını su ve aşındırıcı kullanarak test edin. Gerekirse, meme testi seçeneklerini görüntülemek için test düğmesine tıklayın. B. Testi başlatmak için yükseği seçin, ardından su ve aşındırıcıya tıklayın. C. Aşındırıcı akıştan ses seviyesinde ve akış çapında bir artışı doğrulayın. D. Su ve aşındırıcı testini sonlandırmak için durdura tıklayın. 21 aşındırıcı akış hızını ölçün. A. Aşındırıcı besleme bloğunu düz bir şekilde geri çekerek bimba valv silindirinden çıkarın. B. Ölçüm akışı sırasında salınan aşındırıcıyı yakalamak için doğrudan bimba valfinin altına bir kap yerleştirin. C. Meme testi seçeneklerini görüntülemek için test düğmesine tıklayın. D. Aşındırıcı akışını başlatmak için aşındırıcıya tıklayın. E. Doğru bir terazi ile kapta toplanan aşındırıcıyı 1 dakikalık akış sırasında tartın ve aşındırıcı ağırlığını libre cinsinden kaydedin. Kabın ağırlığını dahil etmeyin. Bimba valfine geri bastırarak aşındırıcı besleme bloğunu değiştirin. 22 kurulumdaki pompa nozülü ayarlarının gerçek ölçülen değerlerinizle eşleştiğini doğrulayın. Makine kuruluma tıklayın ve pompa ve nozül ayarlarını seçin. OMAV makinenizi test ederken kaydedilenlerden farklı olarak görüntülenen değerleri düzeltin. Yapılan değişiklikleri kaydetmek için tamamı tıklayın. "23 kurulumdan olay ve geçiş zamanlamasına tıklayın. Görüntülenen değerlerin makineniz ve kesme durumlarınız için doğru olduğundan emin olun. Yapılan değişiklikleri kaydetmek için tamamı tıklayın. "24 kurulumdan kesme modeli optimizasyonlarına tıklayın ve bu seçimlerin kesme gereksinimlerinizle eşleştiğini doğrulayın. Yapılan değişiklikleri kaydetmek için tamamı tıklayın.
Okay, first thing we have to do is create our DXF file to put into make. So we start with layout, and we're going to make a simple name, which we have one here. I'm going to go ahead and select, right click, I can select all, delete that. So we have a clean slate here. Click on the text. This particular font is the easiest one just to use. A tree, and that's 1 inch tall. And if we want to move that closer to our XY0 point, you can click move. Put it here. Okay, so now we have our basic DXF file that we're creating. You can go in here to the quality of your cut. 1 being the worst, 5 being a very high quality. We'll stick with 3. And we are ready to auto path. You have to hit auto path. What that does is kind of basically get your rapid traverses wherever you need to go. Next, we are ready to move this into the make software. So you post this out. You must save your drawing before proceeding. Would you like to save? Yes. Just going to save it as unnamed right there on the desktop. Ask you to pick a start point. Obviously, the bottom left always. Here it checks for problems. Kind of shows you where it's cutting on the outside. Click check for problems. 0 problems here. Okay. If there was a problem, it would tell you. You could reject, fix it, come back, do the same thing. Hit save. Now, we're ready to go to the make software, which is what operates the machine. Right click on post, open this file, the ORD file in make. It's going to tell you if you already have it open, that it is open. You can just hit retry, and it forces it to open into the IntelliMax standard. Here is the main screen. When it opens up here, it's going to ask you several things, what kind of material it is. We have mild steel A36 plate up right here. Thickness, 1/4 inch. This is extremely important because obviously that's how fast or slow it's going to go and how much garnet it's going to use. This will always stay 15 thousandths. Whether you're cutting with low pressure, high pressure, using the terrain follower. We're not using the terrain follower right now. That's in a different lesson. So we're pretty much, that's it there. Okay. It's computing it, tells you exactly how long it's going to take to run, how much garnet it's going to use, and all that stuff. So when we fire up the machine for the first time, and we're here and say we need to home the machine before we get started. So you right click here on the path start, auto home XY. It's going to ask you if you need to raise the Z for clearance. As you can see, we're not going to hit anything. So I'm going to put 0. We do not need to move. Hit begin homing. And it's going to hit the limits. And if you're here, if you get here and this has already been done and the machine's up and running, this isn't necessary. This is just kind of going through everything that we're going to do starting up. So it'll tell you here on the screen, automatic homing complete. You hit OK. Now, there's a few things the machine needs to know before you can do anything, because if you just hit start now, it's just going to, wherever the last person set the XY0, you can use the arrow keys on the keypad here, which you can't see, but there's keypads here, or you can use these buttons up here to jog left, right, up, down, or X or Y or Z. For the sake of easiness for me, I'm going to use the keypad on the keyboard. And if you want to slow jog, just hit the arrow key, and as you can see in the video, it moves slow. But if you hit shift and then move, it moves faster. So first thing we need to do is set our main Z. To go up and down, you use 7 or 1. 1 goes down, 7 goes up. So we're going to set the Z to the top of the material. So we're going to go down and we're going to get halfway close. Just kind of, and there's this little 60,000 shim here. And to go up and down is, like I said, 7 is up fast, 1 is down fast. Page up and page down on the keyboard is slow. So once you get close, you'll get down here and page down until you get down pretty close. You want a little bit of slop here. That's a little tight. We'll go up. That'll work. That's pretty good there. And then you'll come over here to this screen right here where we're at, and there's 2 buttons on the top left. Go to Z0, which we don't want to do that. We want to set our height. Hover over that, says 0 the counter. Asks you if you want a 0. Yes, obviously we do. And remember, we start at the bottom left. So now we need to set our X and Y 0. So I'm going to move over to the bottom left. And this is not precise. This doesn't have to be perfect. We're eyeballing we're going to kind of eyeball. Obviously, you want to go as close as you can to the edge because you're saving material. I could have set my XY0 in the middle, it wouldn't have mattered. To set my XY0 is right here where earlier where we homed the machine. If you hover, it says right click for more options. So I right click here, you can either auto home XY, or what we need to do is set our path start, which is our XY0 for where we're going to start the home position. It's going to ask if you're sure. Yes, 100%. We're ready to go. At this point, you would raise this up. We have our Z set, our XY set, our DXF is created, everything's put in. There was no problems, there's no faults. If there was a fault, it would be down here underneath the Maxium logo here. This is where we would put this on. And at this point, you don't have to. Normally, I will go ahead and go to Z0, which is going to go ahead and go home. As you can see here, we're at XY0. And at this point, I'll come over to the other end of the table, and I will raise the water. Until the bubbles, that's actually in the instructions. What that is telling you that's as high as it's going to go. And at this point, we will come over here and we would hit begin machining. And then you would hit this start button. But we don't have our pump or anything else on and set. But this is where we would go. It would begin machining. It would stop. Everything would be done. Then, when you're done doing that, you would come over here, lower your water table. And normally it will not stop and raise the Z. So you can hit the 7 button, which will, you hit the 7 button, which is going to wrap it up. And if you want, you can just get this out of your way, grab your parts, and you're done.
Make yazılımını yapılandırma. Bir parçanız için çizimi seçin. A yol ayarını değiştir düğmesine tıklayın ve çizim dosyanızın saklandığı yolu izleyin. B yerleştirildiğinde, Ort dosya adına tıklamak o çizimi bitişik ön izleme ekranında açar. Ki daha önce yol ayarını değiştire tıklayarak açılan aynı pencereden, malzeme ayarı değerlerinizi girin. Gerekirse kesme ayarlarını ve delme, arazi izleyici ayarlarını da yapılandırın. Malzemeyi kesmek. Bir nozulu, malzemenin yerleştirilip masaya sabitlenmesi için yeterli çalışma alanı sağlayan, masa üzerinde uzak bir alana taşıyın. Ki tank su seviyesini masa çıtalarının hemen altına indirin. 3 kesilecek malzemeyi çıtaların üzerine yerleştirin ve malzemeyi kesme sırasında düz ve sabit tutmak için yeterli fikstür kullanın. Dört nozülü kesime başlayacak şekilde konumlandırın ve yol başlangıç ana sayfasını ayarlayın. A. Nozulu kesilen malzemenin üzerine yerleştirin, mevcut malzemenin verimli bir şekilde kullanılmasını sağlayın ve kesim sırasında malzemeyi aşmayacağı bir yere yerleştirin. B. Püskürtme ucu doğru şekilde konumlandırıldığında, yol başlangıcından uzaklık olarak sıfıra tıklayın. 5. Püskürtme ucunu malzemenin üzerinde 1,52 mm olarak ayarlayın ve Z eksenini sıfırlayın. A. Memeyi hızlı bir şekilde aşağı hareket ettirmek için bir E basın, hızlı bir şekilde yukarı taşımak için 7 Y basın. B. Başlığı 0,254 santim artışlarla aşağı hareket ettirmek için pagedovna basın, yukarı taşımak için pajov. C. Meme yüksekliğini malzemenin 1,52 mm yukarısına, malzeme ile kesilen malzeme arasına bir gösterge yerleştirerek ve Z eksenine uygun şekilde yukarı veya aşağı ayarlayarak ayarlayın. D. Uygun şekilde ayarlandığında, Z yüksekliği koordinatları açılır penceresini görüntülemek için Z koordinatlarını görüntüle, göstere tıklayın. Z yüksekliği ekranında, Z koordinatlarını sıfıra ayarlamak için 00 düğmesine tıklayın. Altı kesme yolunuzu doğrulamak için prova yapın. Mav yol kontrolü penceresini görüntülemek için makinelemeye başla düğmesine tıklayın. B. Seçenekler penceresini görüntülemek için başlat düğmesine sağ tıklayın. C. Provayı başlatmak için tam hızda kuru çalışma seçeneğine tıklayın. D. Memenin kesilecek malzeme üzerinde beklendiği gibi hareket ettiğini doğrulayın. Gerekirse, yol başlangıç ana konumunuzu düzeltin ve başka bir prova çalıştırmayı deneyin. 7Z yükseklik ayarını kullanarak memeyi kaldırın ve nozülün manşonunu takın. 8 memeyi 0Z ekseni koordinatlarına indirin. Dokuz tanktaki su seviyesini kesme malzemesinin üzerine yükseltin. 10 begin maçinin, begine tıklayarak kesmeye başlayın. 11 işleme durduktan sonra memeyi kaldırın, su kolunu indirin, kesilen malzemedeki aşındırıcı kalıntıları durulayın ve kesilen parçaları makineden çıkarın. Wet machining center'ı kapatma. Bir memeyi iki masa çıtası arasına su yüzeyinin 0,254 ila 3,81 cm yukarısına konumlandırın. İki memedeki tüm aşındırıcıları temizlemek için pompanın 20 saniye çalışmasına izin verin. Test pompası ve meme test seçeneklerini görüntülemek için test düğmesine tıklayın. B. Yüksek basıncı seçin, ardından jet akışını başlatmak için suya tıklayın. C. En az 20 saniye sonra jet akışını durdurmak için dura tıklayın. Üç tank suyunu en düşük seviyeye indirin. Dört başlığı, temizlik sırasında uzak duracağı bir masa alanına getirin. 5 makine tablasını ve çevresini, sıçrayan suyu ve aşındırıcı malzemeleri temizleyerek silin. 6 suda yüzen kalıntıları temizleyin. 7 mağazaya özel temizlik prosedürlerini tamamlayın. 8 hala PC denetleyicisinde olabilecek tüm diskleri veya USB bellek aygıtlarını çıkarın. 9 Terrain follower için, esnek bir kordon veya benzeri bir cihaz kullanarak ayağı yukarı konumunda sabitleyin. 10 OMAV MAKİNE ve OMAV PC kontroller üzerinde çalışan diğer tüm yazılım uygulamalarını kapatın. 11 Windows başlat düğmesine tıklayın ve kapatı seçin. 12 bilgisayarın kapatıldığını doğrulayın. 13 varsa, toplu besleme haznesinin basıncını boşaltın. 14 şarj pompasını kapatın. 15 su besleme vanasını kapatın. 16 PC denetleyicisini kapatın. 17 hava besleme valfini kapatın. 18 pompa güç anahtarını kapalı konuma getirin. 19 hava besleme valfini kapatın. 20 ortak su seviyesi hava tankının basıncını boşaltın. 21 OMAV ekipmanına ana güç sağlayan kesici kutusunun bağlantısını kesin.
The water jet cutter uses a stream of highly pressurized water and abrasive garnet, which gets blasted out through this very small opening in the nozzle. The garnet that I mentioned is pulled from this hopper through this tube and is mixed in with the water to help with cutting. This water jet can cut through almost any material, including metal, plastic, you name it. Here's an example part that we've cut out. See, this is a piece of steel. You can cut out any shape, any 2D profile that you want. Makes it much easier than any other method. So before we get started, here are some basic safety tips. Over here on our cart are our control buttons. We have a blue pause button, a red stop button, and most important is the red emergency stop button. If anything ever looks like it's going wrong with your cut, hit this button and it will stop everything immediately. When using the water jet, it's important that you always wear safety glasses. This protects your eyes from anything that could go wrong. And also, when the water jet is running, never put your hands inside the tank. It is very high pressure water and you don't want it anywhere near you. Before you begin, it is important to turn on the water jet in the correct order. Each step is labeled with a number. You must follow these numbers or else it can damage the equipment. When starting up the water jet, the first thing you must do is turn on the breaker. So remove the lock and switch it on. Next, go behind the water jet and turn the air valve counterclockwise to the 6 o'clock position. Next, turn the water valve counterclockwise to the 9 o'clock position. Next, turn this red switch clockwise to the on position. Once it's turned on, you can hear the motor running in the background. Next, turn this yellow lever counterclockwise to the 7 o'clock position. This allows cool water to run through the machine. Let this run for about 30 seconds, and then let's turn it off by turning it clockwise back to the 9 o'clock position. Next, turn this red switch clockwise to the 12 o'clock position. When the pump first turns on, give it a few seconds to start up. Next, turn this red switch on the front of the water jet clockwise to the 12 o'clock position. And finally, go to the pump here and press the reset button. Next, you must import your part file into our software. You must have this part file on a flash drive, as this computer is not internet connected. When you plug in your flash drive, navigate to the .dxf file that you have saved and double click on it. This will open up a program called Layout, and as you can see, here are the lines that were in my DXF file. First thing when you import a file is to click Clean, as this removes any issues with the drawing. So leave all the settings as they are, and click also Remove Unnecessary Dots. There we go, so it's clean. Next, you need to right-click on Quality at the bottom of the screen and select All, and then click Quality 3. Quality is a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the roughest cut and 5 being the cleanest cut. For most purposes, 3 is sufficient. So I'll close out of this dialog box, and now right-click on Lead I/O on the left side of the screen and click Auto Path Advanced and Configure. And this adds what are called traverse lines and lead-ins. Traverse lines are where the nozzle moves without cutting, and lead-ins are where it starts its cut. So I'll check that my path is good. I want my part to start from the bottom left corner, so I'm going to go to Path Direction Settings and set the bottom left corner. And so this is a good starting position for the cut. And when I'm finished, I'll hit Go, and see this automatically adds in my traverse lines and my lead-ins. For a small part, which means a part that is narrower than 5 inches, you'll need to add what's called a tab. If your part is very small, you'll need to add what's called a tab. A tab is a small connection to the rest of the material so your part doesn't fall into the tank. An example of a part that would need a tab is this small one here. This would almost certainly get lost. So in order to add a tab, right-click on Lead I/O, go down to Create Tab, and this will give you options for adding your tab. So find any place on this material and just simply click to add it. Some spots are better than others, so when the software doesn't show red lines, that's a good place. Now, one thing to consider when adding a tab is that you must grind it off later. You can grind it or sand it, so you must be able to get to it. So keep that in mind if you have an unusually shaped part. So on this particular part, the G and the T, as well as these 2 holes, will be cut through completely, which means they'll fall through into the tank, and that is normal. Holes are expected to fall through, and they basically end up as scrap. So, next, right-click on Path, and go to Automatically Generate. You'll need to pick your starting point that we decided earlier. So I'll go down to the bottom left corner and click on this edge here. Click it. Now, this shows the path that the nozzle is going to take as it goes through your part. One thing to consider is that this red line here, this red area, represents the offset of the jet. So the jet is 0.021 inches wide, and so that means that it needs to be spaced over a little bit in order to get the right dimensions. When you look at this path, you want to make sure that holes are cut on the inside so that your hole is the correct dimension, and that the exterior line here on this part is cut on the outside. This will make sure that all of your parts are the correct dimensions. So after you've checked that and made sure that everything is correct, go to Save, and that saves your path. So right-click on Path again, and go to Open ORD Path and Make. For this demonstration, I will be using this sheet of aluminum. So on this software, you'll need to input your material settings into this software. So you can click this drop down and pick the material, which in this case, it is aluminum 2024. So I'll click that. I also need to tell it the thickness. So in this case, the thickness is, this sheet is 0.12 inches thick. So here, I'll enter in my material thickness and leave everything else the same. Next, I'll hit OK. And this opens up a program called Make. So next, we need to load our cutting piece into the water jet. So to do that, I will pull down this shield, lift it out, take my piece, and set it into the tank on top of it. So set it in there, and I will line it up with this L-shaped piece here. So next, I need to use weights and clamps or any combination in order to secure it. When you secure a part, you need to make sure it does not wiggle at all. If it wiggles, it could possibly flip up and damage the nozzle. So this is one of the clamps I can use. It has 2 bolts. One bolt goes in this slot here, and then you screw that into one of the holes on this L-shaped piece. So I'll screw that in. Actually, I will use this one. I'll screw that in here. There are several holes on this L-shaped piece, so you have several different places to choose from. So I'll screw that in, and then I'll push it out here so it's touching the metal, and then I'll take an Allen wrench and tighten these bolts down even further. Let's tighten this one. That's one part held down. A good way to check if your part wiggles is to just take your fingers and tap on it. There's still a little bit of wiggling in the middle, so next I'll use this weight, big weight, and I'll set it right here. And now my part doesn't wiggle at all. Another way to secure your part is to use one of these clamps. So you can bring it in, fit it almost all the way, and then squeeze it until it's tight. You see that the garment hopper is low before you start your job. Use this pitcher and put garnet into it. Flip up the top of the hopper and pour it in. Make sure when you're finished putting garnet into the hopper, always keep this pitcher with this side up. If water gets into the pitcher, it can cause the garnet to clump together and clog in the machine. You can use the arrow keys to move the nozzle around on the working area. So I can use the down arrow, the up arrow, left, and right. And I can use this to bring the nozzle over to where I want to start. Using the 7 and 1 keys on the numpad here, you can raise and lower the nozzle. You use 1 to lower it and 7 to raise it. So I'll use the 1 key to bring the nozzle close to my part. You want to leave about half an inch of space though. Don't get it too close at first. So if you look here at our starting point, you'll see these crosshairs. So this corresponds to where the water jet will start your path. And we'll need to set what's called a user home and the path start. So to do this, I'll navigate the nozzle using the arrow keys to where I want to start. The best starting position is one where the path will not interfere with any weights or the L-shaped piece or any already cut out parts. You want to make sure that the nozzle does not run into any high parts because it can break. So the right position to start your path is one where the nozzle will not interfere with any clamps, this L-shaped piece, or any weights. Because these are higher than your cutting surface, there's a risk that the nozzle will break. You also want to not interfere with any existing cut-out pieces, then your part will not be the right shape at all. So using the arrow keys, I'll move the nozzle over to a good starting position. I'll move it down just a little bit. You get a good feel of where to start. And that looks good. It's away from other cutout pieces. It won't hit any obstacles. That's a good place to start. Once you've found a good starting position, you'll click on the zeros here for user home. Click that. It'll ask you if you want to zero the home. Click yes. Do the same thing for path start. Hit the zeros and reset it. And that is how you set your X and Y home. So the next step is to set the Z height, which is the height above the top of your material. So you want to get it very close, but not touching your piece. And in order to get that distance, we have a tool you can use to measure the distance between the nozzle and the piece. So, in order to get the distance, I'll use my finger gently resting on the side of the nozzle, not underneath, on the side, and I'll lower the nozzle using the 1 key until my finger is touching it. You want to be about 1 finger width above. There we go. So that's close. And now I'll use this tool and I'll use the page up and page down keys on the keyboard to do fine control of the height. So I'll start lowering it using page down and I'll sweep the measuring tool under the nozzle. You want to make sure that there's no resistance. So I'll continue lowering it and sweeping and checking. See, at this point, it can't go any further. So I'll need to use page up to lift it until it sweeps with no resistance. If you ever need to check how far it is, you can hold this underneath and pop it up a little bit. This gives you kind of a rough estimate of how far you are. So once the nozzle is at the correct Z height, you'll go to the Z height dialog box and click the zeros. And this will reset the counter so that this is your starting height. Now, it's good practice to check multiple points of your part, particularly if it's a large part. So in this case, I want to navigate the nozzle over to this side here and check the Z height over there too, to make sure that there's no chance it's going to collide. So a quick way to navigate from different parts of the path is right-click on Begin Machining and click Go to Spot on Path. And this will send the nozzle directly to any point on these lines. So the next point I'll check will be this top right corner. So I'll click this. It will move directly to that spot without raising the Z-axis. So make sure that there are no weights or clamps or anything else in the way that could damage the nozzle. When I hit OK, you can see that it moves directly to that corner. So as you can see on the computer, a dialog box called Path Control has opened up. Don't hit any other buttons yet, just goes directly to close. and we're back to where we started. So next, I'm going to remeasure the Z height like I did the first time using the exact same process, and I'll check if it's higher or lower. So to check it, I'll raise it up briefly, put my finger, lower it as if I just started over, and I'll take the tool and use page down, a little resistance, page up, there we go. So now that I found the 0 point of the second part of the path, I check the Z height, and the counter is telling me that this is 0.0055 inches below my previously set 0 point, which means that I need to take the higher of the 2 points in order to prevent a collision. So in that case, I'm not going to re-zero it. I'm going to leave it as is. If this number were higher, I would re-zero it and set it to this new number. So I'll put the nozzle back at the previously set height by clicking this green arrow, which sends it to what the 0 height is. Click OK, and that raises it up back to the original height. So next, we need to make sure that the nozzle is back at the home position. So click Go Home for either of these because they're set to the same position. I do not want to raise the Z-axis, but if you had any weights or anything in the way, you would want to instruct it to raise it and click Yes. But in this case, I will click No. It traverses back to the original spot. When you're ready to begin your cut, flip the yellow cup down. This cup prevents any splashing that might occur while the water jet is cutting and keeps the water contained so it doesn't get all throughout the room. You'll also need to replace the shields, set them back on their ledge. And you are ready to go. You'll also want to move the computer cart well away from the water jet to make sure that no water hits the computer. Before you cut your part, it's a good idea to run what's called a dry run. Before you begin your dry run, raise the Z height to roughly 2 inches. This will make sure that the nozzle is clear of any possible obstacles. To do this, right-click on Begin Machining and click Begin Default. This is that same dialog box from earlier. And be careful because if you click this red button, it will start cutting. To do a dry run, right-click on the red button and click Dry Run at full rapid traverse speed. With the nozzle above the surface of the water, right-click on the red button that says Start and click Dry Run at full rapid traverse speed. The nozzle will then go through the path as if it was cutting, but it will not actually cut. Use this time to make sure that it will not interfere with any clamps, any weights, or any possible other obstacles. When the dry run is finished, you'll need to send the nozzle back to the home position. So click Go Home, No. And then you'll need to set the Z height back to 0. So click the green arrow, move it to the 0 point, hit OK. And then it lowers back to its original position. And now you are ready to begin machining. So once all of your counters are zeroed, click Begin Machining, and then click Start. Now the water jet will begin cutting. Keep your hand near the pause button in case anything goes wrong. Now that your cut is finished, hit close on the path control box. Raise the Z height so that the nozzle is clear of any obstacles, and move it using the arrow keys so that it is out of the way of you lifting your part out of the water. Next, take down the shields. Remove your weight. Use the Allen wrench to undo the clamp. And release the other clamp. You can now take your sheet and pull it out of the water. Let the water run off. Set it up to the side briefly. It's a good idea to use the hose over here and spray the garnet off of your piece. Careful not to spray too much else though. Now since your part is still attached to the material because of the tab, you'll have to wiggle it back and forth until it breaks. It leaves a little stub on the material, but you can sand it off or grind it off depending on what material you've used. When you're finished with all the jobs you want to cut on the water jet, go up to History and Counters and Timers. And we need you to record the total hours on pump in our log. So you'll use the hours here. In this case, it's 319.968. You'll want to record that number in our logbook over here with your name, email, and purpose. So next, close everything, close make, close layout, and you can remove your flash drive. When you're completely finished using the water jet, do the opposite of what you did to start it. So turn off this switch, turn off this switch, go back here, and turn the motor to off. It'll quiet down. Next, turn off the water and the air. And finally, turn the breaker off and lock it back. And remember, this order is important because if it's not done in the correct order, it can damage you.
WOM çıtaları yük altında çökerek yaralanmaya neden olabilir. Çıtaların üzerinde durmayın, ayakta durmayın veya yürümeyin. Aşındırıcı hortumu sistem basınç altındayken ayırmayın. Uçan enkaz, yüksek gürültü. Kulak koruması. Gücü kapatma. Göz koruması. Eldiven giy.